At 0248 hours on February 28th, two Iranian F-14 Tomcats lifted off from Shahid Nojeh Air Base in Hamadan. Afterburners lit. Radar systems active. Their orders were simple: find the incoming threat and intercept. What the crews did not know was that 38 miles ahead of them, climbing through 41,000 feet in complete silence, an F-22 Raptor had already acquired them both. The Raptor's radar had their speed, their altitude, their fuel state, their projected intercept geometry. It knew exactly where they were going before their pilots did. The F-14 crews were flying into a fight that was already over. To understand what happened on February 28th, you need to understand what Iran's F-14 Tomcat actually is in 2026, because it is one of the most remarkable aircraft still flying and one of the most tragic. Iran received 79 F-14A Tomcats from the United States between 1976 and 1978. Ordered by the Shah as the most advanced air superiority fighter the US would sell to an ally. Then the revolution happened. The Shah fell. The US cut off all parts, all technical support, all access to the weapon systems those aircraft depended on. And Iran was left holding 79 of the most capable fighters on Earth with no way to maintain them. Most countries in that position would have grounded the aircraft within a decade. Iran didn't. Iranian engineers stripped working aircraft to keep others flying. They reverse-engineered components they couldn't manufacture. They improvised solutions that American aviation engineers said were impossible. And 50 years later, Iran still has functional F-14 Tomcats, the only country on Earth besides the United States to ever operate them, and the only country still flying them today. By February 2026, estimates put Iran's operational F-14 fleet at somewhere between 30 and 44 aircraft. These are not museum pieces. These are flown regularly, maintained with a combination of ingenuity and desperation, and treated as the crown jewel of Iranian air defense. When a real threat appears in Iranian airspace, the F-14 is what goes up. That is exactly what happened at 0248 hours. The F-14 Tomcat was designed in the late 1960s for one specific mission: defending U.S. carrier battle groups against Soviet bomber formations. Its AWG-9 radar was the most powerful air intercept radar of its generation, capable of tracking 24 targets simultaneously and engaging 6 at once at ranges that no other fighter could match. Its AIM-54 Phoenix missile could kill a bomber from 100 miles away. At the time of its introduction, nothing in the world could touch it. In 2026, that radar is 50 years old. The AWG-9 operates in X-band frequencies, the same frequencies that fifth-generation stealth geometry is specifically designed to defeat. Against a conventional aircraft, the F-14's radar is formidable even today. Against an F-22 with a radar cross-section the size of a marble, the detection geometry collapses. At the ranges where the Phoenix missile becomes effective, the F-22 is essentially invisible. By the time an F-14 radar gets any kind of return, if it gets one at all, the Raptor is already inside the engagement timeline with a firing solution locked. The two crews climbing out of Hamadan at 0248 knew they were flying against stealth aircraft. Iranian commanders knew the threat picture. What they could not change was physics. The intercept attempt unfolded over approximately 14 minutes. The F-14s climbed to 28,000 feet and pushed northwest toward the last known threat bearing, which was already 40 minutes out of date. Iranian ground radar was providing intermittent track data, the same fragmented, jammed picture that had been degrading since 2 hours before the strike began. The EA-18G Growlers operating from the carrier strike groups had been saturating Iranian radar frequencies since before midnight. The F-14 crews were navigating a radar picture full of gaps, ghosts, and electronic noise they could not source or suppress. Their ground controllers were no help. The communications channels between the F-14s and the Air Defense Operations Center at Hamadan were themselves being targeted. Data that should have arrived in seconds was delayed, corrupted, or simply absent. The crews were effectively flying in isolation. Two aircraft in dark airspace with a degraded radar picture and ground controllers who could not tell them where the threat actually was. At 0254, the lead F-14's radar operator reported a contact. A partial return, bearing 315, range 42 miles. The contact held for 6 seconds, then disappeared. At their closure speed, if the contact was real and held course, an intercept was theoretically possible within 4 minutes. The crews turned toward it and pushed the throttles forward. The contact was not real. It was a reflection artifact, a byproduct of the jamming environment the Growlers had spent hours constructing. Iranian radar operators at the ground station had flagged the same contact as probable false return 90 seconds earlier, but that assessment never reached the F-14 crews. The communication link that should have carried it was down. The F-14s turned toward empty sky and began a search pattern that found nothing. Meanwhile, the F-22 was watching all of this in real time. At 50,000 feet, passive sensors tracking both aircraft, sharing that picture with every platform in the strike package. The Raptor does not need to transmit to sea. Its sensors are entirely passive at range, collecting emissions, building a track, deciding. The F-14s were radiating from their own radar systems, from their communications, from the infrared signature of their engines at full military power. To the Raptor's sensor suite, they were lit up like signal flares in a dark room. Posed no threat to anything in the strike, posed no threat to anything in the strike package. Executing a search pattern in the wrong quadrant of the sky, were simply observed and logged. No Iranian interceptors made contact with any U.S. aircraft during Operation Epic Fury. None were engaged. None forced a single defensive maneuver from any platform in the strike package. The F-14s returned to Hamadan at 0342. The strike had been complete for 20 minutes. Here is what the F-14 intercept attempt reveals about the state of Iranian air power in 2026. Iran's most capable air superiority aircraft is a 1970s airframe running on improvised parts, carrying degraded weapons with sensors that cannot find the targets it is being sent to destroy. The crews flying it are skilled. Iranian F-14 pilots train rigorously on limited hours, maintain currency on aircraft that their American counterparts retired 15 years ago, and by all accounts fly the aircraft with competence that far exceeds what the airframe's condition should allow. None of that changes what the aircraft can and cannot do against fifth-generation stealth. The F-14 was the right answer to the threat that existed in 1978. It is the wrong answer to the threat that arrived on February 28, 2026. Iran has invested heavily in ballistic missiles, drone swarms, and asymmetric capabilities. Those investments have produced real capability: the ability to threaten regional targets, to saturate defenses through volume, to operate in environments where a conventional air force would be suppressed. But for air superiority, for the ability to contest what happens in the sky above Iran, the F-14 Tomcat is what Iran has. And there is no replacement in development that changes that picture in the near term. There is something worth sitting with before we move on. The F-14 Tomcat is one of the most beautiful aircraft ever built. Anyone who has seen one fly, the variable sweep wing extended at low speed, the twin tails, the sheer size of it at close range, understands immediately why Iranian pilots have kept them flying for 50 years against every obstacle the world could put in their way. They cannibalized airframes. They manufactured parts by hand. They trained on aircraft that should have been retired decades ago and flew them with skill that earned quiet respect from the very engineers who built them. That story matters. The F-14 in Iranian service is one of aviation history's most remarkable acts of improvisation and determination. The people who kept those aircraft flying deserve to have that acknowledged. But beautiful aircraft and determined crews do not change physics. And the physics of fifth-generation stealth operating against a 1970s fire control radar is not a competition. It is a demonstration of what happens when a technology gap compounds over 5 decades without resolution. There is no amount of engineering improvisation that gives an AWG-9 radar a detection solution against an aircraft with a radar cross-section smaller than a hummingbird. The 2 crews that lifted off from Hamadan at 0248 flew their aircraft as well as those aircraft can be flown. They responded to orders with the information they had. They searched where they were told to search. What they could not do was see the fight. And in modern air combat, a threat you cannot find is a threat you cannot stop. That is the quiet lesson of February 28th, that no amount of missile inventory or drone production changes for Iran's air defense. Until they have aircraft that can see what is coming, the outcome of the next engagement is already written.